Hey everybody, welcome. That's Thomas Dolby. She blinded me with science. We are live Sunday, August 19th, 2007. Welcome to the Atheist Experience. I'm your host, Matt Dillahunty, and joining me this week, Don Baker.
Hey, good to be here.
Yeah, you've been gone a little while.
Well, gone from the ACA, been on a little vacation.
Yeah.
Vacations are good.
Vacations.
Yeah.
All right, I'm getting ready to get a big vacation. So, anyway, welcome everybody. We're live, like I said. This is a public access internet or television program sponsored by the Atheist Community of Austin that allows atheists in the Austin area to interact with the public, to answer questions, discuss issues, debate topics of religion or other concerns. The ACA is a nonprofit educational organization promoting positive atheism and the separation of church and state. And we have weekly meetings every Sunday at Ventana del Sol on East Oltorf. That's for the remainder of this month. Beginning next month, we're going to be going back to Romeo's on Barton Springs Road. And we'll have that address up probably more often over the next couple weeks as we'll be shifting. That's every Sunday except for the first Sunday of the month when we host a lecture series. But because we just like to shake things up, September's lecture series is actually going to be the second Sunday of the month. And that's at the Austin History Center located at the corner of 9th and Guadalupe. And the doors open at 12 o'clock. We get in, sit down, and get ready to go around 12:15 or so. September's lecture is going to be given by the ACA's Mark Lowy, and it's going to be on low-cost textbooks, progressive vouchers, and incorrect TAKS scores, the Texas Assessment of Knowledge. Is that what it is?
Knowledge and skills.
Knowledge and skills. The audio portion of this program is available on the website for download. You can go to the website listed at the bottom of the screen now, atheist-community.org. And under the flagship opportunities, you can go to the TV show. You can also go to atheist-experience.com. The audio is available, and the video for most of the more recent episodes is also available to watch at Google Video. You can also visit the ACA site to get a copy on DVD and other methods if you want as well. But it's freely available on Google Video. The audio is available for download. And the ACA also sponsors a bi-weekly internet audio podcast called The Nonprofits. That's PROPHETS. It's hosted by Dennis Lupe and myself, and we don't take live calls on that show as we do on this show. We do run an interactive chat room with it as well so that the listeners can interact with us and answer the things that we can't come up with answers for. And now that show is now telephone enabled. Jeff D., the former host of Nonprofits, who we're hoping comes back to visit us more often and much sooner. We called in last Saturday when we had the show, and everything seemed to work out pretty well. So we're going to be looking into taking more callers, having guests call in, and remote co-hosts. It won't be the call and ask a question and get a snotty answer format that I'm pushing for this show.
Okay.
There's been a lot of accusations about whether or not I'm too mean or too nice or too patient or
Well, it
whatever.
seems to me that
You
you should balance your comments, right?
Yeah.
If one person says you're too nice and the other says you're too mean, then you're just right.
Yeah, you can't please everybody.
Right.
So why try? Oh, no, that's not what I meant. Anyway, in addition to those two programs, the ACA also sponsors a number of social events throughout the week, including Thursdays we have happy hour at the Dog and Duck Pub, located at the corner of 17th and Guadalupe. And also on Wednesdays we have a rotating schedule of events. This Wednesday we'll be playing pool at Side Pocket on North Lamar, just a couple blocks south of Breaker. That begins right around 8 o'clock. You might want to get there a few minutes earlier so we can get set up. And after this show is over, everybody involved in the show gets together and we go to dinner at IHOP at Cesar Chavez and 35. The show's off at 4:30. We have the room from 5 to 7. And all of our events are open to the public. Any atheist or atheist-friendly person is welcome to come down. But if you are coming down to preach, proselytize, or provoke, please don't. We'll have the number up for you shortly. You can call in. And anybody who doesn't get through on the phone or doesn't want to get through on the phone can email tv@atheist-community.org. That email goes to myself, the co-host, some of the people behind the scenes. There's also, if you go to the website, a frequently asked questions section up there where you can get the answers to some common questions like, what do atheists believe? What don't atheists believe? Isn't your life just meaningless now? And other questions like that, which we'll also be happy to answer on the air as well, as long as we're not repeating ourselves over and over again. The last little bit was actually about last week's show, which we didn't have. We got down to the studio, set everything up, and somebody smelled a gas leak. Thankfully, they put that additive into natural gas so that you
Make
can
it
actually
smelly.
smell it. And we had to evacuate the building. The fire department came down and did all the things that they need to do to make us safe. And it was hot outside, and we had no idea when they were going to be done. So I just said, everybody, take the rest of the day off, and we'll make it up next week. So, Don, you've got twice as much work to do.
Well, that's
we
good.
didn't
I
have a
brought
show
twice
last
as much
week.
material.
Cool.
I'll just talk twice as fast, I guess. Anyway.
And that's it.
That's the handoff, huh?
Yeah. So what are we going to talk about?
Did you want to save this for later, the little news story you have, or it's not that important? I guess.
Yeah, sure. We can hit that later.
Okay. Well, today we have another Atheism 101 topic, which is dealing with mistakes. And much has been made about the conflict between science and religion. And the reason that there's a conflict is they're sort of on the same turf. They're sort of fighting for the same turf. They're both ways of explaining what we see in the world. So, but they have different outcomes and different approaches and this sort of thing. So, the scientific approach is sort of, we assume that humans are fallible, and how can we discover reliable knowledge given that? How can we create stuff that we can bank on, given that the people creating it are fallible and they make mistakes and they have all sorts of little problems along the way? How do we get there? The religious approach is kind of there's this God and he's omniscient. Therefore, any knowledge from God must be completely reliable. So, so there's an assumption here of existence of a God and omniscience and a number of other assumptions, and there's sort of this notion of why would you question God if you think other than God, then something's wrong with you. So one of the major differences between these two approaches, the scientific approach and the religious approach, is how do we deal with mistakes? So the scientific approach is, mistakes will be made, let's learn from them and let's fix them and learn from them. So the main thing here is learning, and I think Tracy brought that out on one of her shows earlier. She happens to be in the audience today, so we're really thrilled about that. So science embodies many error correction mechanisms in order to sort of deal with these errors. It sort of confronts them and deals with them and fixes them. As a result, science is a robust way of gathering information, gathering knowledge. The religious approach is sort of that the religion is above mistakes. For example, the Pope sits on his throne and says, I am infallible. Whatever I say is what God means, and so there's no potential for mistake. There's no admission of there being a mistake. So the dogma cannot be wrong. So as a result of this, religions tend to play mind games and hide their festering problems, and believers buy into this. They don't seem to care about the truth, as belief is a virtue. So those are the two different approaches. So I'm going to talk much more about science now, and then I'll talk much more about religion next. And I think in between we'll take some calls just to mix things up. So to talk about science, first we have to distinguish between learning and bona fide mistakes. So learning is the goal of science. So when a theory or a model fails, when it stops working, or when there's new observations that prevent it from, that the model no longer works, this arouses interest. This is a good thing. This is an opportunity to learn something new, an opportunity to find the problem, fix it, deal with it, create a new theory, whatever. So mistakes are actually, or problems, if you will, with our models are actually a good thing. They're embraced by the scientific community. So, for example, the Ptolemaic view of the solar system, where the Earth was deemed to be the center of the Earth, and the planets and the sun went around the Earth. This was the mode of thinking. This is the common way of thinking for a long time, and this was upset over time, and it was upset by a number of different observations that came in. And this model that the sun is at the center of the solar system, it was a much better model, and it actually worked much better. And so this new evidence was embraced, and eventually this new approach became the mode of operation. And you can give a million examples like that, right? I won't go into a lot of details. But when you get beyond learning, which is sort of really the process of science, there is a notion of real mistakes. There is a notion where where the scientists themselves have been taken in by a falsehood, and there's science, there's an attempt to build science on a false foundation, and these sorts of things happen, all right? And there are mechanisms to deal with this and correct this in science, and I'd like to talk a little bit about that today. So, but before we do that, I need to focus a little bit on how science works so that we can see how it fails. So how science works, basically the scientific method is you come up with some sort of observations of the world, you look at the world and see how it is, you come up with a hypothesis for how that is, and this is something to be tested. You do an experiment to test that hypothesis. So ideally, your hypothesis should be something that's falsifiable, meaning something that can be proven wrong. And you go out and look for evidence that it is wrong. If it's wrong, then you discard it and go on and start again, right? So it's kind of a trial and error thing. If the hypothesis works with your experiment, you might come up with some sort of interpretation based on that. This hypothesis, you might generalize it into a theory and do more experiments, these sorts of things. And eventually, over time, this process arrives at an explanation for what's really going on in the world, or a theory or a model. The increment of science is really a publication. So you want to publish an article or a journal article or a conference article. And a publication is really a small bit of knowledge that is being added to the scientific body of knowledge. And this publication represents a coherent thought. It's related to previous work. You must say in this publication how your new finding relates to what's already there, how it improves on that. You must have published something new. The publication ends up being peer-reviewed, which allows other people to take a look at it before it becomes published, to criticize it and this sort of thing. And I'm actually a scientist. I am a computer scientist, and I actually write articles and I peer review other articles. So I actually have firsthand experience at the peer review process. It's a very important part of science. After the peer review happens, and if an article is accepted by a number of reviewers who are objective and independent, then these articles end up being published, which allows them to be broadcast to people. And the work doesn't really stop there. This is sort of the first step. At that point, other people are reading the article, other people are saying, oh, that's cool, I want to build on that, or oh, that's questionable, I want to see if I can replicate that. And so becomes a dialogue within the scientific community. It's sort of the unit of the dialogue is a publication. So other people will try to build on it or refute it or whatever, right? So it becomes sort of an incremental step in this long-running dialogue within the scientific community. So there are various motivations why a person might want to jury-rig the system for their own benefit or introduce errors into the system. One motivation would be career pressure. And career pressure might be the fact that, scientists, especially in an academic institution, have a lot of pressure to publish. So there's this notion of publish or perish, right? You have to have a certain number of publications and a certain number of respected publications in order to sort of give your credentials to make it in the world, right? To get tenure, to actually continue as a professor. So this career pressure creates a potential for a conflict of interest where people will try to publish things that are second-rate or not so good. And this is, and we'll deal with the mechanisms to deal with this. So that's the first motivation. The second motivation is self-delusion. So somebody may say, I have this great theory in the world, and they may say, I don't see any evidence against it, and they may say, everything I see confirms my little theory, and so this is something that we want to correct against, right? We want to correct against that. And again, I'll get into the corrections in a second. The third one is shortcuts, where science often is very expensive. Often it takes very expensive equipment and loads and loads of time to do. And there's a temptation, I think, to cut corners and to falsify data and these sorts of things. So these are the main mechanisms where basically there might be mistakes in science, and how they're dealt with that is the sort of error correction mechanisms within science. And the mechanisms include things like the fact that things are published in small increments, so mistakes are effectively small. There's the peer review process. There's this notion of building a reputation over time. People's reputation is important. Their institution's reputation is important. The publication's reputation is important, right? So all of these things everybody is very concerned about along the way. There is a notion of sharing of data and openness of how results are done. And so there's a dialogue sort of behind the scenes, behind these publications of, well, hey, how did you get that? Or how can you share your data set with me? I'd really like to run my analysis on your numbers. And this is very, very much, this open approach is very much a part of science. So to deal with career pressure, where somebody might want to try to publish something that's not so good, well, there's this peer review process where the peer reviewer comes in and says, well, this publication is missing references, or it's a duplicated work of somebody else, or whatever. And these peers are people who are scientists in that same area and who know that area very well, and who can recognize good work and who can recognize new work and these sorts of things. And so this peer review process, that can be jury-rigged as well, but in what's to prevent that is the peer review process is done by multiple peers, and the results are kind of taken as a whole from these different reviewers. And so if one of the reviewers says, oh, I love it, and two others say, oh, this is crap and this is the reason why, then the person taking a look at these reviews can arrive at a conclusion. So it's very hard to collude with peer reviewers. The other thing to deal with career pressure is this notion of reputation. If you start to create a reputation of bad results or not very good results, that's going to effectively reflect badly on you. So it's your name on that paper, and so it's in your best interest to produce good work. So reputation is good, also the reputation of the journal, and so on. So to deal with self-delusion, we also have peer review and reputation to deal with that, right? If somebody is producing something that's not objectively true and is based on self-delusion, the peer reviewers are going to catch it, or you're going to eventually develop a bad reputation as an individual for producing these sorts of things. But another thing that saves you here is this notion of replication, where other people need to be able to replicate your results. And this is because science is about dealing with an objective reality, right? So it's the same for all observers. So if a person gets a result in a scientific inquiry, somebody else has to be able to get that same result. It has to be replicable. Otherwise, it's not talking about this reality. It's talking about this self-delusion, or it's talking about bugs in a person's experimental apparatus, or whatever, right? So there's problems there. For dealing with shortcuts, there are all of these same mechanisms apply for dealing with shortcuts. Is basically this openness of sharing results allows other people to look in and try to replicate things. Once you are tagged as someone who is making shortcuts, that's pretty much the end of your scientific career. So this matters a lot. Your job is sort of on the line. So just to wrap up here, and then we'll take a few calls. Just to wrap up for science, we have sort of an egoless system that's about dealing with an objective reality. So science is trying very hard to discover what that reality is. Sometimes there are mistakes or problems with the models that we have, and we go and try to correct them when we figure that out. And we welcome in the scientific community new results and new ways of doing things and new models that can be proven against the observations that we see. So the more sort of observations we have about the world, then the more we learn and so on. And these new theories and things can give us a way of knowing where to look for things. Like the general theory of relativity, there were all sorts of experiments that you could do to confirm it or deny it that people didn't even think of to do before, because it was such a subtle way of the effect of general relativity, for example, was subtle enough that people wouldn't normally go out of their way to look in those sorts of places. So let's if you can, take a few calls, but you're rebooting your screen, right?
Yeah, we get some computer problems, and they're going to feed us the information there. One of the things that I wanted to kind of hit real quick is this idea of new information and how science processes that in kind of revising their current position. And oddly enough, while I would hope that most people would understand this and see the benefit of it, science comes under fire sometimes for being, when they find something new, they just go and change their theories. Well, yeah, that's what you're supposed to do. When the evidence contradicts what you believe, you're supposed to change what you believe.
Right.
So the models in science and these theories they're constantly changing, but the fact that they're constantly changing and constantly open to change based on evidence doesn't mean that we have a zero confidence level in the current model or theory. And that's what some religionists try to portray, is that because science is always open to change, you really can't trust it, because it could change at any minute. Well, why should we believe this? You guys could change your mind tomorrow.
Right.
But the fact that it's open to change doesn't set a zero confidence level. One of the things that's happened recently.
It's changing in a way. The way it's changing is important. It's converging on a result, right?
Yeah.
Right. It's dialing it in. It's bringing things into focus. It's not completely throwing out the baby with the bathwater each time.
Right? Yeah. We don't
do a little fresh bathwater in there every now and then.
We don't find a piece of evidence and completely invert the theory. One of the things that happened recently was this finding and I'll probably get this partially wrong because I didn't actually bring the paper in, but finding fossils from Homo habilis that are dated much later than what we originally expected or what we thought. And for the people who don't understand evolution, who have this view of evolution that it's a ladder or a stack of blocks, they had a linear model where Homo habilis stops and Homo erectus begins. And that would be, Homo habilis would stop here and Homo erectus would continue from there. And what we found is that there's fossils for Homo habilis about right here. And there's all these young Earth creationists and anti-evolutionists who are, oh, look, they were wrong.
Well, they were wrong about a very small detail.
Yeah, it doesn't change the theory. Evolution's not a ladder or a stack of blocks. It's more like a tree or a bush. And much in the same way that, barring exceptional circumstances, your mother didn't die and cease to exist when you were born. In general, she continues to live while you continue to live. And what really happened is, if you look at the branching tree from Homo habilis and Homo erectus, what we thought was it went up like this, and then Homo erectus branched off, and Homo habilis died out relatively quickly. And in reality, what we found is that it continued to live for a considerable amount of time. No big deal. That's how we get the diversity of life on Earth in the first place.
Right.
Yeah. You can't have the diversity of life on Earth without that. If one species ends and another one begins, we'd have one species on the planet. It's obscene and absurd, and a little crazy.
Right, but it certainly they can spin it to make it sound like it's in crisis.
Look, the evolutionists were wrong. Hey, look, we got more information and fine-tuned our understanding of the world, and we're still infinitely closer to reality than you are.
And that's a relatively minor thing. I guess it's of interest because of the disproportionate interest in origins of the religious community. But here's another example. We had maybe 50 years ago, this notion of this continental drift was a newly proposed idea that at one time, many millions of years ago, that the continents all fit together. And from a map of the Earth, it kind of sort of looks like Africa fits in with South America, right? But this was kind of a controversial theory at the time, and it needed a lot of evidence for people to start believing it. And eventually people did gather this evidence, and this theory actually proved to be true. The evidence they gathered was sonic testing to determine the actual depth of the water at various places, and they could actually more accurately determine where the continents began and ended. And they also found the rift in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean where things are being pushed apart, and they were able to actually measure the rate at which these things are moving apart now. So this very controversial theory went from made this long process from being unbelievable to most people to being the standard way of thinking about things. So that's sort of a relatively big example of something that happens. And this happened in small increments. This is not something that happened overnight. There's no revelation or whatever. And there were a lot of people who were skeptical. And skepticism is sort of how this ends up working. Skepticism forces this evidence to be gathered in order to convince the skeptics. And so skeptics are not necessarily a bad thing. Skeptics help make this thing work. So shall we maybe go take some calls? Are we able to do that? We're having some technical stuff.
Yeah, I think we can go ahead and start taking some calls. Is it Phil?
Yes, it is.
Oh, okay.
Hi, guys.
We'll have to adjust volume, but how you doing, Phil?
Just fine. As I told your screener, I've got a situation at work where I've got a guy, I'm in the cube, right? And
Right.
Major corporation. And this guy makes statements along the lines of, lamenting the downfall of America, and he attributes this phenomenon to we're getting away from God. And then he says things like, the United States was founded on religion, and he says grace over his lunch, which that's cool with me. I can,
It'd be good if you turned your TV volume down,
I'm sorry.
because you were getting an echo effect, and it's a little hard to hear you.
Okay, am I better now?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank
So,
you.
In any case, let me repeat what I said. I've got a gentleman who I work with in a cube at work. It's a major corporation, and he makes these blanket statements like the downfall of America is attributable to the fact that Americans are getting away from religion, and America was founded on religion, and he says grace over his lunch, which is fine with me. I can live with that. Like most atheists, I'm cool with this guy being religious, but I just have to bite my tongue sometimes. And is there anything I could really say to this guy and maintain a professional decorum
Can
at
we
work?
turn it down?
Well,
We're getting some huge echo from.
yeah. So as far as answering your
Turn
question,
that down.
I would one question I would ask you is can you have a dialogue with this guy? I think a lot of people who are serious believers, you might actually have trouble having a dialogue with them. And if that's the case, you might not even want to broach the subject. And if you are able to have a dialogue, then what I would do is perhaps educate yourself as to some of these topics and bring in maybe articles for the person to read that contradict his views. That's how I would do it if I were going to have a dialogue with a person.
Well,
Now the fact that you're in a workplace complicates it, right? Because there are sort of consequences, right? You might, I don't know, someone may get up in arms and say, oh, this person is, being religiously discriminatory towards me, or play games like that, or there may be some fallout as far as your work relationship. So it's a complicated issue.
Well, it's made a little more difficult because that person is being inappropriate in the workplace, first of all. Although, to be engaging in conversations like that and speaking a bunch of nonsense that simply isn't true with no regard for the truth or for the opinions of the people around him, that's a problem. And how you deal with it could actually exacerbate the problem. And I'm not advocating anybody just shut up and take it. As a matter of fact, I'm a big advocate of Dawkins' new Out campaign, which encourages people not to sit by and just tolerate kind of religious bigotry and the message that these types of people would want to promote. But if you're trying to avoid being overly confrontational, one of the things you can do, and I imagine you could probably still get it in back issue, the December 2005 issue of the Mother Jones Diary, or Mother Jones Magazine actually, is called God and Country and Where the Christian Right is Leading Us. And there is article after article in here to refute everything that this person is saying in detail about, the tendency of America to get away from religion and how that relates to societal health, which your person you're talking about, their position's false. It goes through the founding fathers, the formation of the country, the idea of whether or not we were founded on Christian principles, and rebuts all of them. And if you wanted to just kind of make a statement, you could always get them a copy of that, put a little yellow sticky on it saying, if you're going to open your trap, educate yourself, and just leave it on their desk.
Or anonymously, thinking of you.
Oh, no, I know.
Well, point well taken. And I'm a huge fan of the Atheist Experience, and I watch it all the time. So I have the good, I think, basic, I guess, platform or background to make my valid argument with this gentleman. But like I said, because it is a workplace environment, I'm a little hesitant to kind of bring this up. And although I'm working for a major corporation, I'm actually a contractor, so it makes my employment more precipitous than it would be otherwise, or more precarious. So I just want to get your kind of input on that. And I think at this point I'm kind of going to let the sleeping dogs lie.
This is more of a social protocol question than an atheism question.
Well, it's more of a yeah, you're right, I guess, in that respect. But I think at this point I'm going to have to let the sleeping dogs lie. One thing I did want to ask you, though, getting off subject, I heard on Air America the other day there was a case, and I'm not even sure where this was. There's a gentleman who converted to Judaism, and he wanted to have his 12-year-old son get circumcised. Did you guys hear about this, or what's your take on this whole deal?
Yeah, I think it's one of the most offensive things I've ever heard. If you're gonna, people get on Dawkins' case on occasion because he's talked about equating the indoctrination of children into religious beliefs as child abuse. And depending on how you define it, I may or may not agree with him. But if you go and convert and take your 12-year-old kid and go to have them circumcised because you've changed your beliefs, that's child abuse. And I'm offended that the courts allowed it. I understand why they did, and it's because they were correct within the law with regard to parents' rights over their children. But I'd like for the world to wake up and realize that, children aren't your property. You can't do with them whatever you want, at least from an ethical standpoint, and that you also have a responsibility to them. And one of the aspects of that responsibility is to let them freely choose what happens to them with regard to their own beliefs, and I would think with major physical changes, mutilations to their body.
Well, my understanding is that the mother, the wife, in this case, is actually litigated, and they're going to court. This is not yet to be decided.
Oh.
So I'm just thinking that...
So I guess they're appealing, because I had heard that the first ruling came in favor of the father allowing it.
Really? That's even more shocking than I would have imagined. Does the atheist community of Austin, I understand you guys are kind of a local community, but I understand there's a national organization. I would have think that the atheist community of the United States, or whatever the blanket organization would be, would have filed a friend of the court or a brief of some sort.
American Atheists may have done that.
Yeah, there are actually a number of national organizations that might take interest in that. There's American Atheists, as Matt mentioned, American Humanist Society, Center for Inquiry, Freedom from Religion Foundation. There's a whole number of them, and many of them do Friends of the Court briefs, and some of them have even brought lawsuits in various cases.
I'm sure I'll hear about it on Handy and Combs and O'Reilly Factor, so I'll let it lie at that and let you guys move on. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Phil. As kind of a side note for Phil, one of the things is that I've had discussions in the workplace about religion and atheism with different people in the workplace, but I limit it. I only talk to people who I know are comfortable with it, people who start the conversation, and I'm always kind of quick to put a halt to it and say, we should discuss this outside of work or whatever else. I'm also kind of selective about who I actually speak to. We had actually a vice president at our company who was sending out religious email spam on the corporate network. And what do? Do you actually walk down to HR and say, hey, look, this VP is doing something that's wrong? It doesn't, I have no problem with the sentiment for the most part of what a lot of that religious spam does. It's kind of this flaky, motivational, isn't life wonderful stuff for the most part. But the corporate network's not the place for spam of any kind, and it's certainly not the place for your religiously motivated spam. When you start talking about how God's going to help us, or looking to the cross is going to help the corporation, get through a troubled time, you've crossed the line. There are people of all kinds of different religious beliefs there, including none, and you've got this kind of condescending arrogance that the world revolves around you and what you believe. It has no place in the workplace. Why can't you just have your belief? And I'm not saying keep your mouth shut. I'm in favor of religious people being able to exercise their beliefs, to proselytize on behalf of their beliefs, but there are limits. You can't. You should. There are places where it's appropriate and inappropriate, and you can encourage people all you want. For example, let's say if your religion has you opposed to abortion, I will protect your right to stand on street corners and yell as loudly as you want that people shouldn't be having abortions. You're free to kind of spread your message. What you aren't free to do is legislate your beliefs onto everyone else, to impose them as the de facto standard upon people who don't share it. It's a difficult situation in the workplace, but that copy of Mother Jones from December 2005 really hits the issues. And if you wanted to do something anonymous, yeah, I think that's probably a good way to start.
Yeah, and I just want to emphasize that as a rule, we would advocate that people speak up in those situations, because that's really the only way things are going to change. But we do understand that there are situations where there is potential fallout, and you need to be aware of that. And if you're kicked out of the workplace, you're not able to change the attitudes there. So
right, yeah, it's not worth
losing your
job over unless you think it is. If you're convinced that there's something so egregious that it's worth losing your job over, then I can support that. I mean, find another place to work and stand up for the truth and let the chips fall where they may. Richard Dawkins has recently started this Out campaign, which I'm not going to give the website for right now, but I've been a supporter of this, and the message of this kind of campaign really mirrors what I've been saying over the past couple of years on both of these shows, and that is that true religious freedom applies to everybody, including us, including the atheists. And it encourages atheists, as I do, to not necessarily sit idly by and just keep your lips shut and ignore injustices done in the name of religion. Now, it doesn't mean, for example, I actually went and there's the A symbol for the movement is one that they've been putting on T-shirts and stuff, and I actually had it added on to my arm the other day.
Look at that.
In tattoo form. But I didn't have it tattooed on my forehead. And there's a reason for that. And it's because one of the things about speaking out is that you want to do so in a way that is also reasonable and appropriate. And I have no problem. If you want to tattoo your head, hey, go for it. I have no problem with that. But what the message that tends to say is, I don't even care to fit into your society. And the message that I'm trying to say is that not only do I want to fit into your society, I am a part of that society. And we need to work cooperatively to improve things and realize where the boundaries are, where my rights end and yours begin. And I support that campaign that way.
Yeah.
But,
well, maybe we've beaten that to death.
yeah. I'm gonna wait. No, that horse moved. I can flog it again.
Okay.
Let's go on and take some more calls. Sue.
Hi, gentlemen. How
you doing?
this afternoon?
Good.
Two things real quick. One is that I'm undergoing that apnea treatment, so my mouth is really, really dry, and I might sound like I have a lisp. And secondly, this is the first time I've ever put this thought into words, so please be
gentle.
Please bear with me while I get to the point.
Okay.
Okay.
I was thinking that with things like science, occasionally something like the Piltdown Man comes along, and it's a hoax, and things go terribly wrong, and in the end, the lay people remember there was a hoax, and the religious people say, look, see, there's no missing link. But who remembers who did the Piltdown Man? Nobody. But if an evangelist like a Jimmy Swaggart or a Jim Baker screws up really big, nobody looks at their message. Nobody says, well, they're horrible. Maybe their message is wrong. They say, oh, no, that person's horrible, and they continue accepting the message as if nothing ever happened. And to me, that's a major difference between the science and the religion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's a good point.
It's kind of a confirmation bias of remembering the hits and forgetting the misses.
Well, it's a double standard, I think, is what you're describing,
True.
right?
But I mean,
yeah.
it's well,
Yeah.
the hits are from their perspective.
Right.
So Piltdown Man being a hoax is a hit.
Right.
Yeah.
But
Yes,
nobody
that's right.
remembers, like, the scientists that even perpetrated it. We don't remember, remember the so-and-so hoax.
They
we
also
remember the Piltdown Man.
Right. They also don't remember how it was discovered. And it was discovered by scientists.
Right.
It's scientists that determined that a mistake
Yeah.
was made.
Yeah,
Right.
eventually got corrected, right.
Yeah, and there's no amount of prayer could have ever discovered that Piltdown Man was a hoax.
But we don't look at the messages. We don't look at the Jimmy Swaggart message or the gosh, I can't believe his name escapes me right now.
Falwell,
700 Club.
Hovind,
Haggard.
700 Club.
Yeah, there's a lot of Swaggart. Yeah, there's a whole bunch of them.
The 700 Club guy, he's actually
Robertson.
very insane.
Pat Robertson, yeah.
Right.
Leg presses like a monster.
Yeah, and it's like,
Once-
why does he have a network TV show? This really
Because
confuses.
he's got money. He's got people giving him money, so he can afford it.
Well, we need people with money.
Amen.
I have two children. I was listening to earlier. I have two children, both of which are adults now. And they've been raised with exposure to church, but not, I'm an atheist. But they've been exposed to church. My mother used to be an organist, and we went every Sunday, and blah, 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 blah. And today I have one atheist and one deist. Neither believes God cares what happens on Big Brother.
Yeah.
But,
Well, I have no complaints with deism. I think it's a reasonable thing, right? That you assume that there's a God and that He created the universe, and we don't know of any evidence where the gods intervened thereafter, and that's kind of what deism says. Is
well, it's not so much the universe he thinks about, but the fact that, like, we can create sim games and we can create robots and stuff. So who says somebody couldn't have created us?
Sure.
But,
And if it's a really good one, we'd never know.
Right, it doesn't matter.
See, on the other hand,
Like the Matrix, right?
I actually have an answer to that, and it's the reason why I'm not a deist, and I don't have any problem with deists as people. I get along with them just fine. I just think that they're wrong. They've made a huge mistake with regard to what assumption they're willing to make, and that is if the existence of this God is indistinguishable from the non-existence of this God, then there's no reason to presume that it exists in the first place beyond a comfortable feeling that, I couldn't come up with a better answer, so I'm going to inject God.
Well, yeah, I think, but is that really different than putting in X when you don't know the number?
Sure it is.
I mean, if you put X plus 25 equals...
No, you're making assumptions about what X is.
Yeah,
If you're using that equation analogy.
As soon as you insert God, you've inserted some properties. You've inserted some. Basically, deism would advocate a completely transcendent, intelligent being that doesn't have any
very
interference
powerful.
with the physical plane now, but is basically the first cause.
Well, see, that's why I say his deism isn't quite... He doesn't start the universe with a God. He just says it's totally possible that there's beings out there capable of creating us.
Yep. Well, we
okay.
can't argue with that, really.
Yeah, possible, sure.
Likely,
Plausible, or maybe.
Anyway,
but
we don't need to argue with your son through you.
Yeah.
But,
That's
did
true.
you
that's true.
did you have something else?
No, it's being hard catching the show because for like the last month, every time I think about it, it's either 4:30 and you're getting ready to sign off.
Yep. Yeah,
Or-
we moved our time, unfortunately.
Right, and then last week you weren't even on, and I'm going, wait, the thing says you're going to be on? No, wait, it says you're going to be on in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
wait.
That was out of our control.
Yeah, we kind of got.
An act of God. No.
Well, thanks, gentlemen. You enjoy your day.
Thanks, Sue. Yeah, with the juggling of the show, we're hoping the new time slot from 3 to 4:30 works out, and it seems to be for the most part. But we've had weeks where we couldn't be on, or weeks where we went on late. Coming up in October, of course, the Mormons are going to probably preempt us again, as they do every 6 months, and I can't possibly bitch about that enough. As if there's not enough religion on public access that the One Atheist show needs to get preempted twice a year by a Mormon convention that's telecast out of Utah. It's not even relevant to Austin. What happened to this being public access,
local cable access, right?
But anyway, enough complaining about the Mormons. I'm sure I'll get more before October. Yeah, so it's been kind of tough, but I'm thinking the slot's working out, and we've gotten some good feedback on it. And as a reminder, anybody with comments, suggestions, feedback can email tv@atheist-community.org and let us know what you think. Is the new time slot working out? Are people kicking cameras? Sorry. We have more people in the studio than normal, so I'm trying to have a bit of fun.
Yeah, we have a real live audience.
But one of the things, in addition to being able to send us email at that address, also you can visit the website. There's ways to interact there with different Yahoo lists, and the phone number will be up, and we'll be taking more calls and hearing from more people. Mm-hmm. Do you want to continue with calls or go back to?
Well, I guess so, and kind of complete the thought, I guess. So right now, what I'd like to do is talk about how religion corrects mistakes, and I guess one of the big differences immediately is that religious knowledge is not objective; it's subjective. It's a mental state that people have. As far as atheists are concerned, that's all it is. It's a mental state. It cannot be repeated or verified or tested, so you lose this whole objectivity thing. So how does religion correct mistakes? Well, if we're talking about Abrahamic religions, the Judaism, Islam, Christianity, I guess you could throw Mormonism in there, there's a bunch of assumptions. First off, there's an assumption that there exists a God who, one, created humans, wants humans to understand and worship him, is all-powerful and has complete control over the universe, and is perfect, and so therefore Abrahamic religion should always, or almost always, get the right answer. So this I think is a number of claims that you can make about within these religions, and when you add them all up, you end up with this conclusion that religions must always be right. They must always have the right answer. And so when you examine this from a distance, you have to say, well, if these religions make mistakes, then the whole religion is suspect. All these assumptions are somehow suspect. So, but unfortunately, mistakes abound in religions. There's tons and tons and tons of them, and there's so many that you can't even catalog them all. But let me hit a few of the high spots. First off, there's no agreement between religions, and there's been a lot of holy wars between them and different holy books. There's no agreement between the different sects of the different religions. There's different schisms and such, so they can't even get their story straight. I did a show on that topic. There's no agreement on the interpretation of their holy books. The interpretations change over time without new evidence. For example, the notion of limbo, right? Limbo existed one day, and then it didn't exist another day, and that's the Vatican is making those claims. Hypocrisy is rampant. There are double standards. Just the last caller was bringing that sort of thing up. Religions are very corrupt. There's plenty of money scandals, sex scandals. There's influence over the government. There's religious icons being created out of thin air, like Guadalupe and the Shroud of Turin, which are fakes, known fakes. Plus, finally, nearly all objective claims made by religions have been found to be false. So whenever religion makes a claim about the physical world and how it is and how it should be, those claims have generally been false, such as the earth being flat, or the earth having four corners, or the earth being the center of the universe. All these claims have been false. The mustard seed is the smallest seed. There's a long list of these things.
Salt losing its savor. But
Right.
the thing is that in those cases where perhaps a religious observation of the world was tested and found to be true, it was science that had to confirm that. Mm-hmm. It was reason and evidence that had to be used to confirm any assertion like that. And without fail, anytime religion has asserted something that contradicts a scientific observation, when we've been able to drill down to find out what the truth is, or what is most probably true, religion has been wrong every time. Religion's never proven science wrong in any way. It couldn't, because the method's not there. So all it does is just assert dogma.
Right, right. So we've hit a number of mistakes, and I'm going to do a little rant on what I consider one of the bigger mistakes that have been made recently, which is the priest pedophilia scandal. I'm going to rant about that in a second. But given that we have these mistakes sitting out there, and given such an obvious problem between the perfection of God and His control over the universe, right? There's this dissonance here, this cognitive dissonance between these two things, and many people cling to their faith regardless of this, despite this. And so this causes outsiders like many atheists to come to the conclusion that religious believers are not of sound mind, that they're not reasoning properly, right? Because there's these blatant problems with their religions, so they're not considering this sort of thing. So let's talk about one big mistake in particular, which is the pedophilia Catholic priest scandal. So we have in this, we have tens of thousands of victims. Many between the ages of 11 and 14, that's about half of the victims were in that age range, most of them boys. We have thousands of perpetrators, that is priests. Supposedly 4 to 6% of all Catholic priests have been implicated, which is terrible. We have this thing going on for over 50 years, maybe much longer. We have many repeat offenders. We have the victims suffering greatly. Not only were they abused, but they have these mind games being played on them for shame and as a sort of thing. And they end up, unfortunately, pretty much harmed for life because they end up not trusting affection. They have trouble in their relationships with their wives and these sorts of things. And it's just a very sad sort of outcome. Nobody in the hierarchy outside of the priests themselves have seen the inside of a jail. So even though there was a whole lot of hiding and collusion and this festering problem, there's been no prosecution. So let's agree right now that this was a mistake. This was a terrible travesty of justice. A lot of people were harmed unnecessarily, and there was a big cover-up, and this went on and on and on. So let's agree that this was a mistake. Okay. So how big was it? Well, I think that this is like, a really sort of a silver bullet to kill Christianity in my mind. So how big a mistake was it? Well, there's no prohibition against pedophilia in the Bible, so the Bible was an error on this, right? So children in the Bible are considered disposable property. So this sort of pedophilia may be a property crime. I don't know. It's not explicitly mentioned. The problem was apparently not fixed by the Catholic Church. So this religious counseling failed. The Catholic Church failed in this instance, so that you shouldn't trust the Catholic Church because they're not able to fix their problems. You can't trust God in this case because God didn't bother to intervene and fix this. So all the prayers for help were unanswered. Any sign that the priest should stop didn't come. Maybe you can conclude if there is a God that he liked to watch this sort of thing. I don't know. Maybe he's kinky. There was no help from the Holy Ghost, who's supposedly helping people make good decisions, right? There's no help from prayers, no help from the morality training that is supposedly the Catholic Church is so good at. Also, there's no help from other Christians who upon learning of this, haven't helped clean house, right? So in effect, the Catholics have sort of been left to their own devices to deal with it. So the only conclusion that I can come to based on this one big mistake is that all of this is BS. All of this religion stuff is BS. All of this, because it failed so miserably in doing this. So the Catholic hierarchy's response to this, and they're dealing with mistakes, well, they browbeated the victims into not confessing or not raising a stink. They blamed the victim in many cases. They created guilt trips in many cases. They paid hush money. They claimed church-state separation allowed them to do whatever they wanted above the law. They tried to reduce the statute of limitations to reduce their risk, because very often these cases take a long time for people to come out. They blame the gays. They blame the priests only, and not any problem with the Catholic Church itself. They filed insurance claims, right? So if you're taking out insurance, that's pretty much a guarantee that they don't believe in God's protection. So there's a problem there. The Pope himself ordered a cover-up when he was Cardinal Ratzinger who ran the Congregation for the Doctrine and Faith. Let's see, what else did they do? They filed bankruptcy. They impeded investigations. They tried whatever supernatural voodoo they had at their disposal, which none of it worked. They tried to control investigations. They did everything they could to protect the church, and they also destroyed records. So what we have here is we have every single thing they did was avoiding dealing with the mistake, avoiding confronting the mistake, and avoiding facing it head on and solving the problem. So what did solve the problem was a bunch of 12-member juries where people sued the Catholic Church, and they got awards and they got monetary penalties on the Catholic Church, and this is what solved it, right? So 12-member juries are more powerful than your God, your Bible, the whole kit and caboodle. So that, what does that tell you about the value of your religion? Anyway, so sadly, the Catholics haven't learned a darn thing from this. This whole learning thing has been thrown out the window. Apparently the Catholics are still going to church, still donating, pretty much at the rates they were before. So let's talk about specific mechanisms where religions deal with mistakes. And these are not solutions to mistakes. These are cover-ups of mistakes. So one cover-up is to say, oh, well, God came down from on high and gave us a new revelation, a new understanding. And so this is a way of putting a Band-Aid on the dogma and tweaking it slightly and saying, oh, God did it. So, like, for example, the Mormons with allowing black clergy, apparently God came down on high and told them it was okay to have black clergy now. Apparently this Catholicism thing, this limbo and purgatory, were patches to the dogma from on high, from the Pope sitting on his throne. So the problem here is that usually there's a conflict of interest when you look at these sorts of things. There's some sort of thing that they want to patch up or address, or they want to make some money. With the purgatory thing, that was a great money-making thing. So that's if you look under the covers, that's usually the motivation behind it. Another way of dealing with mistakes is to guess all the answers, and then so for example, we have a lot of different sects of Protestantism, for example, doing different things, and some of them end up getting the right answer, some of them getting the wrong answer, and so you can play this game of, oh well, these people were not worshiping properly or whatever, and just we'll disregard that, and we'll say, well, we got the right answer over here. Well, the next time around it may be reversed, and so you're playing the same game, but these people had the right answer and these people were doing it wrong. So it ends up being a sharpshooter's fallacy is what it's called, where you basically say, you shoot the gun a few times and then you circle where the bullets landed and say, I got a bullseye. So that's guess all the answers. There's blame somebody big, so you can claim that whatever happened was part of God's plan, or it was the devil's hijinks, right? And that's a good way of sort of hiding the fact that you've got problems and mistakes. It's God's fault, or the devil made me do it, or whatever. But isn't God supposed to be perfect and omniscient, or omnipotent, right? So there's a problem there. There's blame the victim. They deserved what they got, right? Maybe those little kids, abused by the priests. Maybe those little priests maybe those kids deserved what they got, or maybe AIDS really is God's wrath on gays, or maybe the Jews deserve to be tortured and killed in the Holocaust. So another one is projection, where you blame your mistakes on your enemy's behavior. You turn the thing around. So in the abortion issue, you might say, well, abortion, your sexual promiscuity is the cause of abortions, but in reality, it may be the fact that the religions are speaking out against sex education and contraceptive use. So that's really not dealing with the problem. There is the forgiveness scam. There is, you can say, well, you should just forgive the mistake without ever addressing the source of it and such. So if you're really taking responsibility, what you have is you have acknowledgement of the mistake, you learn from it, you try to make some reparations, and you change your behavior. That's how it's supposed to work. But in the religious version of it, you jump right to forgiving, and you say, well, it doesn't matter, and furthermore, if God was insulted, then some money flows to the church. So it's a great scam. There's this short attention span. That's another one where you say eventually people will forget your mistake and it'll go away. And that's part of the reason why I bring up the priest scandal every now and then, is because that's one of the games they're trying to play, is that eventually people will forget it. And I feel a responsibility to raise the fact that it happened and the fact that it was so abysmally handled as an example of religion being a bad thing. Finally, you can go out and suppress the evidence. You can say, well, if you have evidence that I've made a mistake, I'm going to browbeat you, or I'm going to bully you, or I'm going to burn the book, or I'm going to excommunicate you, or light you on fire, or whatever, and that will make the evidence go away, and that's a way of dealing with a mistake. So all of these mechanisms are what's used by religions to deal with their mistakes. They're not correcting their mistakes. They're not fixing their mistakes, really. They're just hiding it or trying to wheedle out from under the responsibility of mistakes. And none of the above mechanisms really address the problem. So in conclusion, what we have is a situation where science creates results because it deals with mistakes and has error-correcting mechanisms. Religion tries to hide from mistakes and ends up sort of stagnant, and nothing is learned. Nothing is learned. So do you have any comments on that? And we can take some callers also.
No, let's go ahead and get back to callers. There's some people
Okay.
been on hold, and we've got full lines right now. We got Scott.
Hey, how y'all doing?
Good. How you doing, Scott?
Hey. Oh, pretty good. I've called in a couple of times before to aggravate you guys. Just to give you a recap on...
Hey, have I been good about aggravating you in return?
You've tried.
Thanks.
You've tried. I'm not a theist, but I don't really know what I am. I like to think I'm a true Christian. That being I guess would depend on what you... I've heard y'all have that discussion.
It would
before.
depend on what you define it, because
Yeah,
I don't really get to define true Christian. I can tell you what I used to think it was.
Well, and mine continually changes too as I and going to the topic of this of correcting mistakes. Okay, I don't see that the teachings of Jesus, the applicable teachings of Jesus, are at all in contradiction with scientific thought. In fact, I think they are scientific thought in the form of a psychological approach.
Well, if you're talking about if you've got a red letter Bible, if you're talking about just what's in red letters there and attributing that to Jesus, okay.
Yeah, so you understand what I'm saying.
I don't know that he said anything of any significance that it could possibly challenge science on an issue.
Didn't he say that the mustard seed was the smallest seed?
It's the smallest seed in the garden. To be precise.
Well, he also said that salt could lose its flavor, and that's scientifically false. So
that's okay, but you have to consider a few things. Jesus spoke cryptically. And when he said things that were not
No. You don't get to
That's
reinterpret
spin.
and
That's
spin
spin.
this.
Well, no, let me
You
finish.
said-
Why don't
hang
you
on.
let me finish? I've been sitting here for 30 minutes on
Okay,
hold. You know.
please do.
Well,
And let me explain to you what I'm saying. Consider the time and the opposition in which he lived, in the society in
how
which
is
he
that
lived.
relevant to whether or not salt can lose its flavor?
Okay, I'm going to explain it to you.
That's all I want to know. Go
Okay,
ahead.
and if you'll give me a second, I'll do it.
You got one.
Okay. You got to consider the time in which he lived. He could not speak openly about a lot of things, even if they wouldn't have killed him, which they ended up doing, even though he spoke metaphorically. The people wouldn't have heard him out because they were so dogmatic and ignorant. Okay. It was actually. I see it as ingenious the way that he approached these things. But to point out that salt can lose its flavor, everybody knows that it can't, and that's the whole point. But knowing that and facing that will completely change the meaning of what he said.
No, it's not the whole point. You are respinning this. The verse in context makes no sense if, in fact, it is true, which it is, that salt can't lose its
That's
flavor.
right.
So
That's right.
you're saying that it's good that it makes no sense because he was really saying the exact opposite of what he was saying in order to portray a different meaning.
Haven't you ever, paid attention that all the religious teachers worth their salt always have taught with metaphor and with
I
contradiction?
have no problem with metaphors.
Okay.
No, hang on, it's my turn.
Okay, go ahead.
You said that there wasn't anything that Jesus said that contradicted science, and I provided one example. I don't really think it's hugely relevant. I don't have a problem if he was speaking metaphorically, but the thing is that it was false, and you don't get to go back and anachronistically say that, oh, we knew it was false and it was intended to be finally understood that it was false. Now, we get to look back on it. He was speaking to specific people at that time.
Yes.
And saying something that was false. And you're now saying that because we now know that it was false, obviously Jesus must have known it was false, so he meant something else. And that's a link that you don't have any justification for making apart from your assumption that he couldn't have been wrong, so you're respinning it.
No, that's not at all what I'm doing.
You need to actually justify that Jesus intentionally said something false in order to portray a different message.
Okay. And I could do that. I could do that on the very subject that you brought up.
Okay.
I'm not going to spend the rest of your callers' time doing it. I can email you and explain it if you would like.
I'd love that. TV at atheist-community.org because
I promise you that you will. I'm not very good with words. All right.
obviously,
if
you think that you can take something that is fundamentally false, that within the context of the passage has to be false, has to be true for the passage to make sense, and then respin it. Yeah, there's a problem there.
Okay, but it is a metaphor of a bigger issue.
Metaphors
the thing he is talking about.
Metaphors tend to be true.
Yes. Well, no, not necessarily.
Yes, necessarily.
Not necessarily. I'll cover that.
Yes.
I didn't want to go this direction by calling in.
Okay, then go the other direction.
What I wanted to point out is that for number one, I am. You guys have got some good stamina. I mean, y'all. I don't know how many people in y'all's lives personally y'all deal with that are dogmatic religious Christians. Everything I was raised in, my family and my friends are, and I'm in complete opposition to them. But I'm absolutely overwhelmed with them. And I get really disheartened sometimes, and I get tired, really tired. And originally, when my viewpoints began to change, it's because I accepted the arguments that people like y'all were providing. And I took them serious, and I took a good hard look at them. And it turned my life upside down. And you were talking earlier about why.
Can you explain a little bit? You're saying you accepted certain arguments, I guess, that led you to be an atheist, and it turned your world upside down. But that doesn't really mean anything to me. I mean, are you talking about in a negative way, or what did you actually believe, or what? And how did that affect you?
I was a very dogmatic fundamentalist Christian.
Okay.
And circumstances in my life, I think what it boils down to is I got over a certain amount of fear that made me be able to face a lot of the arguments put forth in the problems with the interpretation of Scripture and, and within the organized religion.
Sure.
And what it did was it helped clean house in me. I'm absolutely mortified by what I see and what I'm around as far as religion goes, and particularly Christianity, because that's what my society is, filled with.
Sure.
Any Christian watching should take careful consideration of the arguments that y'all make, because the only thing that keeps them from doing it is fear. Fear is the root of their dogmatic position and why they fall back on belief.
I think we're mostly in agreement there. I think I'd extend it, though, because I'm kind of curious, as you seem to have arguments as well. And I don't know what the justification is. For example, hang on just a second. You talk about the words of Jesus, and I know lots of other, particularly liberal Christians who I think are fairly reasonable. Thomas Jefferson was one who redacted the Bible in order to just keep the teachings of Jesus. But as somebody who's read and studied those teachings, there's a number of questions that I don't know how you got past. One is, outside of the Bible, there's not a single contemporary source to attest to anything in Jesus' life or his existence. I'm not saying he didn't exist. I'm just saying there's no evidence to suppose that he did. And number two, when you actually read through what's in there, for example, the Sermon on the Mount, I've done an entire rebuttal to the Sermon on the Mount because it's full of really bad advice. Take no thought for tomorrow. Don't save your money. It has bad laws about adultery. It has bad advice in general. The whole Sermon on the Mount encourages this idea that you will be persecuted, and that is a good thing. And you should not only expect it and anticipate it, but set yourself up to be used and abused and persecuted. The Sermon on the Mount turns people into victims. So what is it about the Jesus message that you find counters rationality, or the rationality that I would advocate, I guess?
That I would have to know you well, because the only thing that can
I think you would have to know you well.
Yeah, well, no, that's how I've come to see any of it, and that's the exact point. Because when you're full of flaw and you're in denial of it out of fear and because of pride and because of ego, you're not gonna improve at all. You're gonna stay a slave to society and everyone around you, including their opinions and their behavior.
I don't see what this has to do with what I was asking.
It has everything to do with it, because we're talking about a proper interpretation of the teachings of Jesus.
No, I didn't say anything at all about interpretation. If you have some special interpretation of don't save for tomorrow and trust that God's going to give you everything, does that not mean what it says?
No.
It doesn't mean that. What about
but
what
that's
it says?
not at all what he was saying. He says, don't worry about it. I've never seen a Bible where it says, don't prepare. It only says, don't worry.
No. Actually, here, Matthew chapter 5 would be the Sermon on the Mount. There's plenty of things in there.
Talking about the sowing and and the spinning and whatnot.
There's plenty of things in there that are bad advice. If you go to ironchariots.org, as a matter of fact, when you email me, let's not do this now, because I think the issues are far more subtle in where you and I personally disagree.
Yeah,
so
very
if you email me, and I'll also provide you a link to my rebuttal of the Sermon on the Mount, which, by the way, if anybody wants it, they can email to, or you can go to ironchariots.org, the wiki that Russell and I put together, and you can just do a search for Sermon on the Mount, and it'll be there. My thing is that one of the things you had called in the original screening thing was that science doesn't contradict religion, was the point that was listed here. Did you want to hit that real quick before we move on?
In that statement, it's actually very vague, because everybody, in the church I grew up in, even among families and close friends, you go and listen to them, they debate among themselves as even to the attributes of God. Okay? So that's something that would be an 8 or 10 hour discussion between us.
Yeah. And I'm willing to have it, just not on the air.
Oh, I understand that.
Which reminds me, you're invited, as are any atheist or atheist-friendly person, to join us down at IHOP today. After the show's over, we're done here in about 15 minutes, and we'll be down at IHOP around 5 o'clock. There's the address on the screen. They were about to come and bludgeon me if I didn't mention it. So,
I'm going to be working this afternoon. Otherwise, I would love to, and I've wanted to before, but I wasn't sure if that was an appropriate place for any kind of discussion like that.
We'll start with an email, and you and I can meet some other time for interesting discussion.
That would be appropriate. And the main thing I'm trying to say that I want to get across to y'all is that your enemy is ignorance.
Sure.
And it's the true enemy of the core of religious teachings. And I'm not talking about dogma, and I'm not talking about theology.
Ignorance.
And what you're talking about, that the earth was created in 7 days.
Hang on. Ignorance isn't the enemy of religion. Ignorance is the friend of religion.
No. What I'm saying is that, and I will try to produce it to you where you'll see what I'm saying. That in the core of Jesus' teachings, ignorance is the enemy. That is what the teachings are to, if you apply it to your life, that's what they're designed to destroy. It's basically a psychological approach. And it's quite interesting, and I'll do the best through email. I'll let you go so y'all can get to another caller.
See, I think you're taking we'll have to do that because we got like 15 minutes left and there's other people in line.
Yeah, we'll do that. And
personally,
I'll
I think you're injecting things that you've come to understand and realize and injecting them into Jesus because you've already lifted him up on a pedestal where you think he must have been saying something relevant like that.
I gave up everything I believed at one point, and I didn't want anything to do with Christianity.
Well,
and it was completely honest.
Okay, well,
but we can talk about that later. It was nice talking to you guys. Y'all have a good evening.
Thanks, Scott.
Bye.
We'll move on real quick. Is it Lupe?
Hey, how's it going?
How you doing?
Doing pretty good. I'm going to keep it quick, and I'll keep it simple.
Sure.
I don't believe in fate, destiny, angels with harps and wings, and the devil with a pitchfork, and God with a long beard, and all that other stuff. But the question I do have is, I've always wanted to ask you guys, I've seen your show a few times, is did Jesus and Abraham and all these people, did they really exist, though?
Not as far as I know. I mean, there are plenty of people that we have good reason to think existed. There's
like who?
Paul, for example. I mean, because at least there's somebody who wrote first person as Paul. But with regard to Jesus, it's generally assumed by almost everybody on the planet that he actually was a real person, and he may well have been. But whether or not
there's a website that explores that called JesusNeverExisted.com.
There's actually a few of them, and be careful where you go because some of them are less scholarly than others. For example, anything by Acharya S., I'd chuck it in the garbage because she's incredibly unscholarly and has never met a conspiracy theory she doesn't like.
But I think the point is that there is some honest debate.
Yeah. So there's no reason, we have no evidence to think that Moses actually existed. None.
Okay.
And that's true for pretty much anybody in the Old Testament. Unless you view it as like a historical document and say that there are people that these things are based on, there's none of it. Now, with regard to Jesus, you'll hear apologists say that, he's better documented than anybody in history, and that's just a blatant lie.
If you can,
we can include
quantity over quality.
Yeah,
perhaps.
we can. If we include the Bible, we have pretty much the sum total of words written about Jesus that are even close to contemporary. The problem is that not even the Bible was written contemporarily. The earliest gospel, Paul started writing 30 some odd years or so after Jesus would have died if he existed, and he may well have. And the Gospels were started around 70 AD and continuing after that. So there's
over 100
nobody
years or something, right?
over the course of more than 100 years, possibly. There's nobody. I mean, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Those aren't the names of the people who wrote it. We don't know who they are. The church just threw those names on there. None of them are writing as first-hand eyewitnesses to the event. They're all relating a story that they've heard. So what you've got is we don't even have any of the originals. The earliest copies of anything from the New Testament, the earliest that we have are still from like the 3rd or 4th century. And they're copies of things that we're trying to guess which century they were written in, whether it would have been the 1st or 2nd. So you've got a really shaky ground that you're trying to build this existence on. And
Okay.
I don't happen to run around saying, oh, Jesus never existed because there's no evidence for it. That's not my position. He may well have existed. I don't think the things that are written about him in the Bible are true if he did. And I think that in order for anybody to believe that he existed, that the recording of his words are accurate and the recording of the events of his life are accurate, you'd need more evidence than a handful of copies of translations of hearsay accounts of stories. It would be like me writing Elvis is still alive and telling you what Elvis wants you to know and do, because I had a vision of Elvis at Kirby Lane Cafe last week.
I got you. Well, another thing that's always kind of like bothered me is that, logic, reason, history, science tells me that God doesn't exist, and angels, and like along with other things like fairies, things like
Sure.
this. So the thing that bothers me is I've taken a look at the Bible, and it's just so well written. I mean, who sat down with a pen and a piece of paper and came up with this elaborate story about the Red Sea and raising people from the dead?
The stories
all this other
evolved
stuff.
over time, right?
But you're
they're-
saying from different writers? From
yeah,
different
sure.
writers?
Yeah, they're good because they've sort of stood the test of time and they've been embellished
And most of the good
tweaked
stories aren't original to the Bible.
Yeah, the flood
The
story
flood
predates
story
the
from the
Bible.
Gilgamesh epic. You've got all these various other things. Jesus is like the umpteen-hundredth died and risen Savior God. You've got many of the deities that appear in disguise in the Old Testament are from Tracy. Ugrit. Tracy's done a whole series on the kind of polytheistic or henotheistic Old Testament gods. So
Yeah, you
there's
can look up
nothing
the
new
old
under the
shows.
sun.
Are there particularly good books on this that you might recommend to our?
Yeah, Bart Ehrman's got a book called Lost Christianities, which covers other early Christian writings. There's Who Wrote the Bible, and I've forgotten who wrote that book. There's lots.
Robert Price is a pretty decent author.
Robert Price has a new book out that I just ordered. It should be here this week. I haven't read it yet. Called Jesus is Dead, which it probably doesn't necessarily mean what some people immediately assume.
Yeah,
it does,
he's on a lot of audio broadcasts called under the name of the Bible Geek. So you can search for him on the web and listen to some of his broadcasts. He's very good.
The important thing to me, though, isn't whether or not Jesus actually existed, since it's nothing we could possibly prove anyway. It's are the stories about him real? And my answer is there's not even remotely close to enough evidence to assume that those stories are real or accurate. I mean, if it weren't for the fact that the Bible was generally given reverence by all the people around you growing up with, if somebody walked up to you and handed you the Bible and said, read through this, do you believe that this is real? Any reasonable person would say no. It's because we live in a society where we're kind of instilled with this inherent respect for something that I don't think is deserving. But
Yeah, and let me throw something else. Like a lot of things that we can't explain away. Do you think that maybe we just haven't progressed in, like, say, the field of science to explain certain things away that maybe 500 years from now, 1,000 years from now, as we progress and know more, that we can explain away a lot of these things that can't be explained, where people just say, "Oh, it has to be God."
Sure, that's been the
See?
progress that
Yeah.
has not too long ago that lightning was God's wrath.
Yeah, and the Earth was flat, right?
Right.
yeah,
There you go.
I don't think discovery is going to stop anytime soon, and I hope that we continue to develop a better understanding of reality.
Right.
Because personally, I think as we continue to do that, you'll find that religion fades away, and I don't just mean that as religion. I'm not necessarily out here trying to destroy people's faith or hope or anything. I'm talking about let's eliminate superstition and magical thought by replacing it with truth, with rationality. And if we find
I agree 100%.
that the superstitious thought was right, if we find that people are psychic, or there is a God, or there is a good reason to believe it, then we'll believe that, because that's actually true and justifiable.
Sure, I got you.
I gotta let you go. There's a couple other people waiting on hold, and we got like 5 minutes left.
All right.
Thanks a lot.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
the call. We got, is it Mike? Oh, echo.
Hey, how you doing?
Hey, good, Mike. How you doing?
You can hear me pretty good?
Yeah.
Now listen to this. I'm not going to say nothing about nobody's religion or this. I'm just going to just talk. The first one I'm going to talk about, when the guy was talking about science,
Would that be me?
And the development of science.
Yeah.
Listen to this.
Yeah.
Let me put a picture in your mind. I can see your face, now listen to this.
Okay.
Adam had 2 sons, right? And those kids,
That's what the story said, yes.
okay, those kids grew up, right?
Yes.
I think one was a farmer, tilled the land. That's what they call farmer tilling the land, right?
Yeah.
Right.
and
That's
one
what the
was-
story says, yeah.
Okay, and one was a cattle herder or something. Cain was a cattle herder.
Something
Right.
like that, yeah.
Now listen to this.
Uh-huh.
Listen to this good. Now I can't remember Adam doing it, but the kids grew up making altars and sacrifice to God.
Yeah.
Now where did they learn that?
Good question. Good question.
Not only that.
And I got a
after
question
them
for
came-
you.
Now
I got a
listen to
question.
this. After that concept came Abraham. He built altars and gave sacrifice to God.
Yeah.
Now where did all those beliefs come from?
Where?
Did Adam do that?
Well, Adam presumably chatted with God and knew.
Okay, now
That's
listen
what
to
the story
now
says
listen,
anyway.
Listen to what you said. He chatted with God. But where did that knowledge come from to chat with God?
What makes you see? Here's the thing: you're assuming that these stories are real.
No,
to
no,
begin
I'm
with.
just asking a question now. I told you I'm just asking questions.
Yeah, this is a
Okay.
literary
Now listen to-
criticism
now listen, I'm
question.
gonna put in your words.
Hang on. Let me ask you about a story.
Okay.
When Superman's craft landed
Oh, no,
outside of
listen now. I'm not
Smallville.
going to that.
Hang on. Yes, we are. When it landed outside of Smallville and he began to discover his powers, how did he grasp an understanding that he was actually an alien?
I think there were people there to teach him.
Okay. So thanks for answering your question.
Okay. Now you answer my question. God taught him now. He said, name the things, Adam. And Adam named the things, right? He said, who told you was naked? There was people there all the time, man. Like you said, I don't believe in the superstition. I believe in the reality.
Okay.
Okay.
Now, where did Cain get his wife from when they was the only 4 on earth?
You got me.
The people was there all the time, man. The
They were-
knowledge was there. Now listen to this.
Okay.
Speaking
So I
of
guess that
God-
answers why Adam and Eve had grandchildren, right?
Now, well, like I said, that's
Where
what
were
science
where were the
comes in.
women to you know?
Like I said, I appreciate science. Now listen to this.
Actually, we can't listen to this because we've only got a minute left in the show, so I got to let you go.
Okay, now let me ask you a quick question.
Okay, one quick.
I heard it at the atheists for years, but I never really knew what they believe. What is the atheist belief?
We believe. What do we believe in? The same things everybody else believes in, except we don't believe in a God.
Okay, but you know who your God is?
We don't have a
Tell you
God.
who your God is.
If you say science, I'm hanging up.
No.
Actually, I hung up anyway.
Sorry. Yeah, we're out of time.
You could actually make a case that science is that. We are out of time. Appreciate everybody. We'll be back again in 2 weeks. You feel free to come down and join us at IHOP. Anybody in the Austin community who's atheist. or
Thanks to our
atheist friendly.
crew and thanks to the callers.
Thanks, everybody. We'll see you then.
Join us at IHOP.